and archived on our YouTube channel. So if that would make you feel uncomfortable with your camera on, please turn that off now before we begin. Hi to our new joiners, welcome. Okay, so let's begin. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining and welcome to this Product People event. Today's session is about overcoming anti-patterns and will be presented to us by David Pereira. Before I hand it over to David, please let me introduce myself and Product People. So my name is Mia. My name's Mia and I'm your host today. I have experience in design systems and B2B SaaS. And as of September this year, I joined the Product People team and community as an associate product management consultant. So what do we do at Product People? We help companies discover and deliver great products faster and empower our product community to share knowledge generously. We also help companies through our engagement. We do all the hands-on and unglamorous work of a product manager on an interim basis, usually between 3 and 36 months. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes. So before I hand over to David, we'd love to hear from you. Those on Zoom can do so on the pop-up that will appear shortly. And for the ones watching over other platforms, please do share your answers with us in the comments. So I'll quickly read out our questions. Sorry. So how familiar are you with anti-patterns? A, I have a deep understanding and actively apply anti-pattern principles. B, I have a basic understanding and encounter anti-patterns occasionally. C, I've heard of anti-patterns but have limited practical experience with them. And D, I've never heard of anti-patterns. And question 2, which of these anti-patterns have you experienced with your team? Building without understanding of validation for the need. B, prioritizing outputs over outcomes. C, not reassessing value of previously launched features. D, the combination of the above, or E, none of the above. So I'll give you a bit longer to answer. Okay, so I think we have enough answers now to form some conclusions. So let's take the results and see. So how familiar are you with anti-patterns? The most popular answer is that I have a basic understanding and encounter anti-patterns occasionally. And no one has not heard of anti-patterns, so that's great. And for question 2, which of these anti-patterns have you experienced within your team? The most popular answer is a combination of the above. So thanks for answering. Okay. Now I'll hand it over to David, who is CEO at Marco and an expert on agile product management. He'll be speaking about overcoming anti-patterns within the product space. And so David, you can now share your screen and begin.
Sure, thanks for that. So let's start having a chat here. Thinking how I could start today and had a memory coming to my mind about digital products. My first contact with digital products was 16 years ago as a software engineer. And what is funny about being a software engineer is like I imagining creating products that would make the lives of people better. But what I realized actually was I had to fill a list of requirements, which I had no idea what they were for. So I asked many questions, several questions. And mainly the questions were, why are we doing this? I think it didn't take long to get a nickname, and my nickname was Mr. Y. And, it was very annoying being a software engineer without knowing why I was doing what I was doing. And eventually, life was quite interesting, and I got a chance in 2012 to be a product manager. And once I started working as a product manager, I said, now I'm going to change things because I will ensure that software engineers and designers know the why behind the what. And then I quickly realized that when I exchange with stakeholders, they would tell me precisely what they wanted, and the only few would tell me why they needed. So I kept asking questions, sometimes even saying, if I don't know why, I'm not going to do it. Then I received a new nickname from Mr. Y to the business blocker. I said, all right, it is a bit hard to provide a why. And eventually, after some years, I had a chance of becoming a head of product. First time was in 2016. I said, at this time, I will ensure that everyone gets the answers, and I will ensure that I can give the why because I wouldn't be the one asking questions. Maybe I would give answers. And I realized it was not that simple because day in, day out, I had to fight against a corporate firewall. What I realized today is that many teams face similar traps. It doesn't matter where you are. I have been from Brazil to Germany, startups, scale-ups, established corporations, public sector, and traps are just ahead of us. Sometimes they have the name of anti-patterns, but let's say it's something that gets in the way of creating value. So that's why today we're going to talk about untrapping product teams. So I'm going to give you some hints on what you can do today for a better tomorrow, and also help you understand common traps. For that, we need to look at how companies generally work. If you're part of a bigger organization, just imagine a unit inside of your company. So all companies will have something in common. They have a lot of teams and so on. So management deciding where the company should go, customer service to ensure all the complaints are solved, and marketing to get the word out. So you get some customers, operations to ensure your business is working. And at some part, there will be the product team or product teams. But here, pay very close attention. These are the ones getting the things done in a digital company, creating value and so on. But depending where you work, the label will change. Might be Scrum team, might be development team or something else. But the ones creating the output will be this one I'm talking about. And quite interesting is what all teams have in common. All of them have something, and it's not just people. It is about the most brilliant ideas in the world. At least they think so. So all of them will have amazing ideas. And generally, these ideas, they tend to confuse people. And the more we avoid talking about what matters most, the bigger our product backlog becomes. So we just put all in there and we say, yeah, eventually we take care of this. It's kind of just postponing a conflict. But as a result, the product team or Scrum team will have to talk to a lot of people. And the question is, how do you deal with that? There are different ways. In general, no matter the framework you work with, I see two ways of working with this. One I call the coordinative development flow, and the other is the collaborative. Only one really works. Let's start with the one that generally goes sideways. The coordinative development flow. You know you are in a coordinative development flow when something goes wrong, you know exactly the person to blame. So you will know whose fault it is. And you realize that you spend a lot of time talking about the work and little time doing the work. The beginning of both flows are the same. You have a lot of ideas and limited capacity. But the start here is very different. There will be a lot of discussion about the idea you should pursue next. And once you decide that, probably it will take weeks, if not months, because there will be a lot of studies. What is the most promising idea? Then you start doing the design. There's a phase. Even if you work with Scrum, that may happen outside the team, and the team will receive that later. But there will be a design phase where you need to define the prototypes. And once you create prototypes that stakeholders love, you have the right tonality of blue, the buttons are rounded enough, and everyone internally love, it's time to run some tests. But here comes the danger. The test will be biased because stakeholders already love the design and designers also love it. So it is about confirming you're right. You are probably unwilling to drop this anymore. Maybe you are willing to tweak a little bit, changing the text, adapting the button, something like that. But it won't be something as brave as saying, this idea sucks, we better throw it away. It is better to move on. And then you throw over the fence, and probably software engineers will hate you forever because they were not part of the initial prototyping, so to say, and now it's their job to launch it. It will take a while, there will be friction, designers will fight with software engineers, and product managers will try to facilitate this discussion. The end will be a feature goes live. That's it. Eventually something goes live. And then everyone wants to celebrate, but what happens is you will get the fanciest piece of crap in your product. You create something that you didn't know why. Users couldn't understand how that helps them get their lives better, and it makes you the product. The question is, what do you do next? You create something that creates no value. The real challenge here will be that probably you'll go back to the prioritization committee and there will be more discussions, and then you pick another idea, you'll do all over again. So you create a lot of waste. It's common in a coordinative development flow to ask one question. How can we accelerate delivery? Although this question has some value in it, it's not the best question to ask, because delivering more doesn't mean creating more value. We need to recognize one thing, and it's very hard for us to recognize, which is reality. 9 out of 10 ideas will fail. So if you doubt me, you can just look at what happens to startups. Most startups created 5 years ago, actually, they don't exist anymore. Probably only 10% made it. There are statistics for that. Many startups will just disappear. And what happens also with corporate, once startups grow, something happens. We forget that our ideas fail, and we keep delivering for the sake of delivering. If you look at the success rate of experiments of big companies like Spotify, Netflix, and Google, and so on, actually, more or less 8% of their experiments show positive results. There's a book for that, A/B testing. It was written by Ron Kohavi, and he has a lot of studies about. But if we look at this, 9 out of 10 ideas will fail. Asking how fast can we deliver won't be that helpful, you know? It is better to ask another question. And my recommendation is asking the following. How fast can you drop bad ideas? So you need to understand what is bad and what is good. The faster you drop the bad ideas, the sooner you can invest in the good ones. But there will be an enemy in front of you. We're talking about anti-patterns, right? So let me share something about the real enemy. You remember when I said I started as a product manager, I realized that it was very hard to do my work, which was understanding what would drive value for business and customers. It was very hard to understand that. And I realized that many times I was doing anything but product management. And I have been trying to search for a name for that. And eventually I found a name. And the name is what I believe to be bullshit management. Because you think you're doing product management many times, but actually you're just doing bullshit management. And what is that? The word is strong because it's super annoying. Let me explain it to you. What the heck is that? It's an art of spending time doing things that bring no value, but drain your energy. And there's an equation behind it, very simple. And you need to understand this. Because the more bullshit you have to deal with, the less value you are going to create. So for today here, I'm going to share just a few signs that you might be dealing with bullshit management and help you overcome them. You can find more in my content, but I will give you 4 examples. Maybe you can connect to them. So I call this one as bullshit management over product management because it's very unlikely you can do product management without dealing with a little bit of bullshit because it's all over the place. So you need to be familiar with that so you can overcome it. The very first one I call as the waiter. So why is it the waiter? Imagine you go to a restaurant. So if you go to a restaurant, the waiter will come to you and ask, what would you like to eat? And then you may say, yeah, I would like to eat a burger, the chef's burger, but please remove the onion because I don't like onion. The waiter may offer you something as a side dish or maybe something to drink, and then you take a Coke and so on. The waiter goes to the kitchen, hang on the wall, and if you're lucky, after 15, 20 minutes, you get your burger without the onions, but only if you're lucky. When I look back to my career as a product manager, I was a waiter in the beginning. It's embarrassing to say that, but reality, I would go to stakeholders, I would say, what do you want? They would tell me, I would take notes, I would make suggestions. I would try to build on top of their suggestions. The waiter's job, it is to give the food exactly the customers want, but there's something the waiter doesn't care because it's not the job of the waiter, is understanding the needs. Maybe if I'm ordering a burger, I shouldn't be eating that. Perhaps I have high cholesterol. Maybe I shouldn't be drinking the Coke because I am diabetic. But the waiter, it's not a waiter's problem, you know? But when it comes to product management, if you deliver on the want without knowing the needs, remember the smiley poop? Maybe that's what you're gonna get. You create something that solves nobody's problem. So it is your job indeed to go beyond being a waiter. You need to understand the need behind the wants and then connect to your strategy and decide if you're gonna pursue that or not. So don't be a waiter. Another trap is the consensus. So consensus is an art. And many people think that it's an art of getting everyone in. I think it is an art of creating the worst idea possible that was not even on the table. For example, you start talking to stakeholders and none of them talk to any user, but all of them have opinions. But they are not designers, they are not software engineers, but they won't commit to something if everyone weighs in and they see some part there. Well, it is important as a product manager to let opinions speak lower than evidence. Evidence should always trump opinion, and expertise as well should trump opinions. You don't need consensus, you need consent. In a scenario that we agree that this is the best option for the product, and then we can move on. Let me give you an example that has nothing to do with product management. It is about my wife and I. Once we were going to a wedding, and I was ready. My wife was getting ready. She was already wearing a very beautiful blue dress, but she didn't know if she would wear flat shoes or high heels. And she asked my opinion. I even didn't know what to answer. But she said, what do you think? What should I wear? High heels or flat shoes? Tried to help her. I said, what's the difference? She said, well, one is fancy and the other is comfortable. I said, what do you feel like? She said, yeah, it's gonna be a long night, so maybe comfortable. I said, there you go, flat shoes it is. She said, yeah, but a lot of people will be fancy, right? So maybe I go with the high heels. She said, then I said, all right. I said, I don't know. I said, all right, let's meet in the middle. Maybe you go 1 foot high heel and the other flat shoes. That will be fine. It's consensus. I prefer you being comfortable. You want to be like that. She looked at me and said, that's nonsense. I said, well, it depends. You would be comfortable and fancy. And that's what happens with products. So try imagining if you're building something comfortable and fancy. Pick one thing. Think what is best for your product and go for that. It means you're saying no to some things. The other common trap is about failures. Failures are just part of the business. You may change the name if you want. You may say that the experiment didn't provide the desired results. It's just another name for failure. But it means if you have to explain failures all the time and answer one question, which is, what are you going to do next to avoid it? Innovation will just disappear. Because then it means you are going to color inside the lines. You need to create a process to avoid failures. A better way would be, what did you learn from it? I had this situation in one of the companies. The founders realized that we were not talking about failures. It was a taboo. And the founder was very scared about it. So he decided it was time to have an event where people would openly talk about failures. So the event was funny. It was called the Fuck Up Night. And we would have a DJ, we would have some food there. And the founder would say, time to share what we learned from our failures. Of course, no one wanted to take the stand and go there and share. But the founder started. The founder went there and said, the reason I'm standing here right now is because I took 3 startups to bankruptcy. That's why I'm here. The first one I took to bankruptcy because I was unwilling to pivot the solution. Although I received a lot of things, signs that I should pivot, I never pivot. The second one is because I tried to be too big and I wanted to postpone revenue. So it's important to shorten the cycle of revenue. And then he kept saying, so he shared a lot of learnings. And then he said, this startup will only succeed if we fail fast and we share the learnings with each other. So let's ensure that I don't take the fourth one to bankruptcy. So this humbleness in front of everyone is what opened up the culture where everyone could talk about learnings instead of failures. So the more you focus on failures, the less you can innovate. So this is one thing about trap. Another one is how often you say yes and you say no. Because there's something from James Clear that he says, every yes you say is a responsibility you take, while a no is a decision. So you need to understand if you're making more decisions or if you're just taking responsibilities without thinking. I received the nickname Business Blocker because I realized I was saying too many yeses. So I created a strategy to avoid that. But my first strategy was quite flawed. I would say no 3 times to everything without thinking. And then if the person would come back the 4th time, I would listen. Well, it's true that not all stakeholders bother to come the 2nd or the 3rd time, but the ones that didn't bother, they bother sending an email to the boss of my boss, who was pretty annoyed with that. So my strategy had a problem because I was not empathizing with stakeholders. So I changed this strategy to ask questions. Whenever someone would come with something, I would say, interesting. So what is the result you're trying to achieve with that? How many users are impacted with that? How often do they have that? How does this relate to our strategy? Which evidence do you have supporting this? What will happen if we don't do it? If I say yes to this, what can I say no to? So I ask many questions. And the more questions I ask, the more stakeholders reflected and they would ultimately say no to themselves. And that was a better way because I was not saying no at all, but stakeholders said no to themselves. Sometimes they would have the answers and then we could move on. So these are some examples of common traps you are going to see. Remember, the waiter, fancy and comfortable, consensus, the worst option for the product, focus on the failures, avoidance instead of learning, and how often you say no. Now let me help you understand your scenario and also overcome some of the traps. So I told you there are 2 ways of working in general, no matter the framework used. We talked about the coordinative. Now let's talk about the collaborative. The collaborative flow is very different. The beginning is the same, you have a lot of ideas, but instead of picking the one, you pick all of them. And then you say, let's evaluate. And here is an exercise that should take a few hours, maybe 2, not that much because you are pragmatic here. Of course, you need to do your homework, but you start asking questions like, how does this support our vision? Then you remove the ideas that don't. You say, how does this support our strategy? Then you realize that actually they don't support your strategy. You just get rid of them. Then you say, how does it do these ideas support what matters most right now? Like you look at your roadmap and say, we want to achieve this in our first quarter of the year. How does it support that? And you realize it doesn't, so you get rid of that. Then you have some more ideas that would be encouraging you to learn. A lot of people ask me one question. What do I do with the ideas that I get rid of? Should I put in the bottom of the backlog? I would say, please no, because then you're going to have a cluttered backlog. I would say that the trash bin is your friend. Make the trash bin bigger, not the backlog. Whatever is important will come back to you. Then you can deal with that in the moment that makes sense. And the idea is that you move on here about learning. You're trying to understand the ideas that are worth pursuing. So you ask questions. Which is the evidence we have that customers want it, desirability? And you kick it off. You kick it out, the ones that you don't have. And then you say, how do we know we can create value for the business? Saying that the idea is viable. Some you don't. And what is the feasibility of that? So you trim down. Here might be you need to run some experiments. But I'm saying that this is about a few days. And experiments here would be, how do you know customers want? You may need to interview them. You may need to run some quick prototyping. How do you know it collects business value? Maybe you get a low commitment from customers subscribing to something, providing the email. How do you know you can do it? Maybe you just run an experiment with your team, like a spike. But this is just a few days. And now we go more seriously. We want to test this with starting with a sample audience and then growing. And this is the moment I say you first build to learn, then to scale. You're not going to do all in. So you take your ideas and you experiment with each idea, at least a couple of solutions, because you don't want to fall into commitment escalation and confirmation bias. So pick a few ideas here and they start experimenting. But you realize that some ideas, when you scale with more part of your audience, it doesn't work. But there will be one or another idea that they truly work. So these ideas, you remember, you first build to learn, then to scale. Here, you pay the technical debt off and you roll out to your whole set of users. And then you end up with an idea that was worth transforming into a feature or something. And the other ideas, they are just gone. So this is the collaborative way. It means that you help each other. And how do you know you are on the way to do that? So first thing is how fast you can drop bad ideas. The faster, the better. And here it is about using product discovery. Because you need to have a balance between future and present. If you stick on the present all the time, somebody else is going to build the future. And if you travel to the future all the time and you don't commit to delivering anything, it means somebody's building the present. So you need to have balance between both. And for that, we need to talk about the right ingredients. In general, I like looking at two things because I'm not so good dealing with complexity, so I try simplifying everything. So two things you need to look at are the empowerment. How can teams make decisions on their future? And how fast can they learn? If teams have low empowerment and low learn speed, so there will be just feature factor. You keep delivering, you don't know why, but somebody outside the team is calling the shot. But it can be that feature factor teams figured out how to learn what works. They look at data, they understand what works, but they still lack empowerment. They'll be frustrated because they need to fight against each other, against the top management or somebody to decide what to do. But it happens also the other side of the coin. Sometimes the team lacks empowerment, but then something changed and they have empowerment, but their learning speed is still super slow. They don't know what to do next. The thing gets beautiful when the team has empowerment and has a high learning speed. So it means you will be driving value all the time. So this is how I evaluate teams, and then I try helping them. And now understanding the ingredients, what you can run with the teams you work with, it is a series of health checks. So the very first one I call as the product management health check. You remember, in the collaborative flow, I ask some questions. So do you have a product vision? If you have, how often do you use that? Do you use for roadmap planning? Do you use that during your sprint review? Because having is not enough, you need to use it. What about your product strategy? Is it something that simplifies decision making or something that you have no idea what it is actually? Because a good product strategy creates constraints that helps you accelerate decision making. What about objectives? Do you know where you're going? What is most important right now? What about principles? Do you have common principles with the team, knowing how you collaborate? Something that shocks me quite often is that teams are clueless about their business model. Because if you don't know your business model, it's very hard to create something that makes sense for your situation. So it's important to understand the business model and adapt it. For example, maybe today you have a subscription model and works well. But what if you could switch to a freemium business model? You need to understand what makes sense, but you need to know your business model before. So once you understand the big picture, that's what product management health check is going to give to you, you can start going a little bit further. How do you practice discovery? Do you know your value proposition? So once you understand that, it is easier for you to focus on what you are trying to achieve, for the value you're trying to create, the jobs you're trying to solve, and so on. How often do you talk to customers? Talking is just not enough. It is about getting insights. How do you identify assumptions? Things that you believe to happen, but you don't have evidence about it. So first is about identifying and then prioritizing the most critical ones. And then you test assumptions. And then you learn and pivot. And how do you define solutions? So this is about product discovery. Once you do these aspects here, you start seeing the big picture of your whole team. You may look at me and say, wow, we rated everything super bad. I have no idea where to start. Start with the assumptions, because no matter where you are, you can always make the assumptions. Even if you are a feature factory, you can say, what are we assuming to happen once we put this feature live? Maybe you say, we are assuming that users are going to pay for that. We are assuming that increased conversion rate. Then you can say, what can we do today to test if this assumption is true or not? So you start testing assumption, then it will give you the cards that you don't have. Then once you test assumption, say, oh, it means that it doesn't stand true. So maybe we need to start ideating. And once you have evidence, it's easier to talk to stakeholders because it's very hard to deny evidence. What about product delivery? So I shared something with you about implementation. If you try building everything right from the beginning, it means that you will create a lot of things super good that nobody needs. Then you will be unwilling to trash that when the time comes. So it's better to build something that, it's quick and dirty in the beginning. And then once you learn its worth, then you build it right. You also need to measure results, and results not about velocity. That doesn't matter. What matters is what you create from that. And be brave. It is very unlikely that teams review their features that are live in the product and start deleting. I always encourage teams to have an analysis of all the features they have created over the last months and understand how often are users benefiting from that. How is it driving customer value? Because keeping features on your product that create no value will be hard for you. Will be hard because then it increases complexity of the product. You don't want a cluttered product. You want an uncluttered one. Failures, it is just part of the business. It's going to happen. And also managing your product backlog. It is quite important to have a sustainable backlog because if you don't, it will be very hard to manage it. Let's say product backlogs age like milk, not wine. So keep them there just for a few months and then if they don't make to sprint, you just get rid of them. So to wrap up this one here, what I want to tell you is you always have a chance to do something different. And I encourage you to step back from whatever you're doing, reflect, what is happening right now? And then you say, what is something that we want to see different? And then you challenge the status quo and try doing something a little bit different. Because you always have a choice and you can decide which one fits you. The very first choice is a simple one. You look at the status quo and you say, whatever, I'm gonna make peace with that, but I'm not gonna complain. I accept it's gonna be it, and that's it. Or you can be like me, a little bit more annoying. So you look at things that you don't like and then you start changing it. So if you do that, you give yourself a chance of better tomorrow. So thanks for that. And you can subscribe to my newsletter for free. I send posts every week, and then you can benefit from that. I share some insights, some learnings. You can contact with me on LinkedIn and so on. And what I want to leave it here with you is an opportunity to join my upcoming cohort. So you have a voucher here of 15% off. It's about product discovery. Has been an adventure during this cohort already with people from different places in the world. If you would like to join, then feel free to have a look there, and you can benefit the discount until a little bit before Christmas. So here's a link for you, and I'll take the time for questions. Thanks for that.
Thanks, David. If I could take over with screen sharing, that would be great. Thank you. So yeah, thank you very much, David. Really interesting session, and thanks everyone also for attending. It's great to have you here. And we wanted to give you a chance to ask David some questions. So if you want to share your questions in the chat, or if you're watching on different platforms, share in the comment section. We'll be reading your questions in a moment. And whilst you draft up some questions, I will tell you a little bit more about product people. So here you can see some of our use cases for when it might be appropriate to bring someone from our team on. So our interim product managers and owners cover parental leaves. They scale your product management team quickly, and they lead key initiatives whilst bridging the gap until a full-time employee joins. We cover parental leaves for 3 to 12 months or unstaffed permanent positions. And with us, you can get temporary help to help drive product discovery and delivery for a deadline and create big impact in a short time. We can also coach your product management team to reach their full potential through streamlining processes from 0 to 1, including product ops and program management. We can also help you to run the discovery to uncover the next impactful initiative or product. Here you can see some of our B2C clients. So we work with some pretty big names. We have an impressive roster of use cases and case studies. And here are some of our B2B clients as well for you to have a quick look at. And now some stats on our company. So we've supported over 200 cross-functional teams and 70 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. We also have 40 product leaders and product managers full-time in-house to deliver high-quality services to our clients. And we also take pride in having 62% of women in the team, with 66% in leadership roles. And here you can see a quick snapshot of our team. So we have a really wonderful and diverse team of product experts who are truly a blast to work with. I can confirm that from my own experience. Everybody has different specialities, comes from different backgrounds, speaks different languages, and they're definitely an asset to the clients that we work with. And we're hiring, actually. So if you're looking for a product management role, please do check out this QR code here. And if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter as well, feel free to scan the QR code and find out more. And I can see some questions rolling in at the moment. So David, if you're ready, we'll start taking some questions.
Sure. So
So we have a question from Chuckle, who asks, how can we encourage the product teams and the management to switch from coordinated flow to a collaborative flow?
need to make the experience smaller, so as easy as possible. It depends on the size of the organization, so I would say there's no one size fits all. Let's suppose a situation I have. I'll give you an example. It makes it easier. I worked in an organization that we had 8 product teams, and we were working very coordinative. So we created roadmaps, and then we had to fight against each other all the time to get things prioritized. The way that could change that was by showing that we never delivered what we committed to the roadmap over the last 2 years. That was one thing. And the second thing was helping management see that we have a situation that nobody wants to be in. So we did a report of features delivered over the last 6 months. And actually, it turned out that 50% of the features were never used. And then when we look at the others that were used, they were actually not really driving value. So we asked management, is it a situation we want to be in? And of course, the answer was no. I said, what if we run an experiment? We take one team and start doing a little bit different. This team, instead of prioritizing everything upfront and committing, let's say we start very small and so on and so on. And then we measure the results. So we managed to convince the management to do with one team. And as they experience, they accept rolling out. So that's what I encourage you to do. Make it smaller. If you are just one product team, then say, let's commit at least 20% of our time to do things in a more collaborative way. And then you compare the results. Because generally in a coordinative way, you commit upfront too much, and then you are forced to deliver. And the other, you are forced to deliver results. So it's different. So make it smaller and speak with results as you evolve. So that would be my recommendation.
Sorry, I was on mute. Abby, I can see that you have your hand up. Would you like to take a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and the organizers of this great session. So, I think one of my key takeaway points from this session is actually a quote from you, where you said, "Product backlog age like milk and not wine." And one of the things you mentioned as well was the fact that you said features should be thoroughly evaluated, and features that are not, necessarily adding value to the business should be expunged after, evaluation. So I'll give you a very good example. You've analyzed the features carefully, and you realize that they're not necessarily adding value to the business, right? And you decided to expunge that particular feature from your product, only to realize that a couple of months later, customers are complaining that, oh, we're not, having this feature on the platform, and you're getting a negative PR on social media. In that situation, how do you handle that particular situation? Should we say that you didn't take your time to analyze the situation properly, or what? I want to understand. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. So, of course, every situation is different. For me, it's always about learning. So you cannot play safe all the time. If you keep everything in the product, you won't learn what is important or not. I had a situation in one of the e-commerce I worked. So there was a huge complaint that customer service was overloaded. The customer service said, we have too many requests and so on, and we cannot handle it. We need to automate the request or do something about it. So I went to talk to them. And as I talked to them, some of the complaints were like, I want to know the status of my refund. I want to cancel my package. I want to issue a return. And all of these went through customer service instead of doing it through my account, which we have all of these features. It confused me. So when I looked at my account, I realized that we had a lot of features that were never used. And when I asked people, why do we have it? Nobody could ever tell me. So what I decided to do was to run an experiment. We removed the features. And funny enough, with the group that had the features removed, because we had an A/B test in this case, we hid the menu to be easier. Actually, the customers with the hidden menu, they were not contacting customer service that often anymore. What happened is that my account got so cluttered that it was confusing people. The learning is the following. If you receive a negative feedback, you can react to that. But if you have something that you are not even receiving feedback, it's worse because you don't even know if it's benefiting or not. What is important is to understand the core of your product and ensure that you deliver on that value proposition for your ideal customer profile. Because sometimes we build things that are distracting. And it's fine if some people leave your product if they are not your target audience, main target audience. Because as the product grows, it's natural to acquire more customers. And it's very easy to start focusing on the customers that represent a minority instead of the ones that are related to your core value proposition. So you need to remain true to your value proposition. That is a part where you should not compromise and remove features or things like that. For me, it's always about the learning. So learn and then react. If you receive a negative feedback, still good because you learned something, then you can do something better and review your decisions.
Thank you very much.
Sue, would you like to answer a question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, David. I have a question. For example, if I start a job in a new company, that means I'm a new person, a new product owner, and there's like many product owners, many different departments, as well as product manager and product head, like many hierarchies. And then I suddenly get a request for adding a feature for one of our app because the competitor have added feature, seemingly they are having success. And it now just come to me. What should be my approach to that and not falling in the anti-patterns because it's coming, and also the management is saying, yeah, actually that's a good idea because it's also our competitor are using. I mean, I have some idea, but I would rather like to know your inputs to that, like how I should approach to that and not fall in the anti-patterns.
There are different ways to tackle this one. The first, I would say, run an experiment and see how that speaks to your audience. That's the easiest one to move away, because here there's a lot of opinions and assumption. The very first thing that is dangerous is that the competitor built that and it's necessary. Because I had a situation in my life, I consulted many companies, and I had a situation where one company said, we need to build this because it's killer. Our competitors have it. And it turned out one of the competitors was my client, and I asked the question out of curiosity, why did you build it? And the competitor told me, because our other competitor built it. So they didn't know it. So you can't go in a loop of building things because competitors are building and only one knows why. And what I learned throughout my life is copying the competitor will ensure you remain behind the competition. And you can never be a better shadow. So you need to understand what is important for your audience at this moment. If that feature is important for your audience, first you need to start with the problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then you work from there. I know it's easier to look at the competition and say, whoa, they have this, let's create it. All right, but let's understand the needs of your audience, because probably your audience is with you because you have something different than your competition. It's worth you investing more on that.
Right, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for that question. And we have a few that have come in. So how can we encourage the product teams and the management? Oh, sorry, we had that one already. How do we go about prioritizing which anti-patterns to attack first? It's most likely context-driven, but are there ones to prioritize first?
It's very context-driven. So it depends on a few things. If you are on the leadership level, let's say you are head of product, CPO, VP of product, first thing to do is to solve the strategy. So that's where you start, because that has a dramatic impact on every team. But if you are a product manager or product owner, it's hard to start on the strategy if you lack one, for example. Why? Because you need to talk to a lot of people and influence them. And they might be reluctant to change it. So you need to start in a place where you can show results as fast as possible. I gave an example about assumptions. So if you are not testing assumption, that is one thing that you could start doing. If you are always building everything perfect from the beginning, then you should start using, for example, technical debt as a tool to help you accelerate learning. If you have a cluttered backlog, then you can benefit from being a little bit audacious, go into your backlog and filter everything that is not touched over the last 6 months and delete it. And then that will help you create more alignment, because then you focus. So you trim down your backlog. So it depends on your context and the challenge you are having. And generally, what I recommend teams, you do the health checks and then you commit to one thing to change over the next month, and then one after the other. Because many people think that working with product, it is about accelerating and so on. It is more like a marathon. It's not a sprint. It is a journey. It takes a while. And it's hard. So if you try changing everything at once, then you inject so many new things that you won't be able to handle. So take it easy, one at a time, and review every month where you stand, and then decide what you're going to do different the next month.
Here we have another question. Shifting mindsets has always been difficult for me as a product manager in a feature factory company. What can I do to promote user validation and business value to our developers?
Get the stakeholders to watch someone using the product. So I had I had several situations in my life. I will give one example. A business director came to me and said, we have to provide more information for our products, because our products have too little information and the users wouldn't buy it. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, for example, I am a winter sport lover, so I love buying winter jackets. And look at this, it's missing all information. I cannot buy it. And I said, interesting, you cannot buy it. And then he was saying, we need to do it. But the problem was, like, we were a marketplace, and changing that, I would need to convince all of our partners to send more information. It would be very problematic. We had several interfaces. But I said, well, let's run a test. In my mind, it was clear that the business director was not our target audience, because he wasn't the director level. And our target audience was young families searching for discounts because they had limited budget. I said, let's just try it out. So we created a page and we hacked the page with all the information he wanted to see there. That took us around 2 hours to do it. We just made it quick and dirty, and we ran A/B testing for 1 week for one specific jacket. And then I asked the business stakeholders to watch the recording of videos. What happened when we put the heat map and everything? And I said, you see what is happening here? People see this amount of information and they bounce. They go to another page. Now let's interview some users to understand. Because I left there, when people would bounce, I left a comment, oh, sorry to see you leaving. What could we have done better? And some of them we interviewed. And then the business stakeholder observed customers saying, when I come to your website, I know precisely what I want to buy. And when you load me with information like this, I think you're trying to fool me. Because it's too much information. I just want a discount of something I know I already want. So that was the learning. And then the business stakeholder said, okay, so let's not do it. Doing that would be at least 1/4 of investment to the size of the change and the amount of interface impacted. So help them learn as fast as possible. So in short, you need to move from opinions to evidence.
And what are the best practices for overcoming anti-patterns when working with stakeholders who by nature are resistant to change?
It's hard to say the best practices. I don't like the term best practices because they change all the time. I would say leading practices.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, work with stakeholders. There's a lot of challenge because digital products are new. When we look back, we are used to, as humans, we want to know what happens next because we want to feel safe. And digital products, we cannot feel safe because that will mislead us. It is about building a relationship where we move away from stakeholders or our customers. We need to please them. Because the other side of this coin would be stakeholders are our enemies. We need to fight against them. None of them was going to work. If you try to please them, you end up on the waiter and the pattern. If you try to become the enemy, then you end up as a business blocker, as I had. A better way is to collaborate closely and build partnerships and say, to create digital products, you need to trust my responsibility. I am the product manager and I know how to create digital products. You, for example, dear stakeholder, you understand about law, you understand about business. Let's combine our understanding and support each other on this journey. So the problem is sometimes the stakeholders, they try telling you how to do your work. I generally try making an analogy. Analogies work quite well because people understand. I say, let's imagine when you go to the doctor, dear stakeholder. Let's say you have a back pain and then you arrive at the doctor and you tell the doctor, hey, can you just start cutting here my back and start making, I need a surgery here. Just do it quick. I'm strong. You don't need to put anesthesia. The doctor will look at you and say, hey, I'm the doctor. So maybe you tell me what happened yesterday. So, no, nothing different. I was just helping a friend out to move to a new apartment. I was carrying some boxes of 20 kilos. The doctor would say, just have a rest. It will be all fine. What happens in the world is sometimes the stakeholders move too much into the solution space and start behaving as if they know best. Your job is to help them move to the problem space, and then you understand, and you need to behave as the doctor. So you are responsible for the solution space. So it's building relationship, getting closer to them, and moving away from this service provider style. So that's what I would say. It takes a while.
Okay, and that was our final question. So yeah, I'd like to thank you again, David, so much for presenting a really, really insightful presentation. I can definitely vouch for everyone in saying that it was very helpful and we all enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for attending as well. We'd love to see you at our next Product People Meetup on the 9th of January, where Sharon Danis, the entrepreneur and resident at Antler, will be speaking. So yeah, we hope to see you there, and I hope you have a great evening, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good.